Hello, students, and welcome to episode 2 of What to Read While Quarantined. I'm Coach Stroud, I'm your host, and again, I have some books for you to read or to look into. I know in the last episode, we talked about Amazon, we talked about eBay, we talked about contacting your library to see if they can mail you books. These are all options for all these books. I hope you take a look at them. Some of them are more popular, and you can find at every bookstore, some bookstores that are still open right now. And I know libraries will have the vast majority of these as well. So, welcome to episode 2. Again, to my students out there, I hope you're doing well. I love you guys. I miss you like crazy. And let's begin. So, the first book I have, again, I'm really bad with dust jacket covers. For those of y'all wondering, when you have a hardback, you've got that jacket that holds the book and stuff. I have a tendency of, when I get the book, I take them off because I don't like reading with them on it. And I lose them or they get thrown away. And it's a really bad habit of mine, and I really need to work on that and get better at it. But, so here's another book that does not have a dust cover. But this is called Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter. It is by Seth Grahame-Smith, and it is a young adult book or a teen novel about how Abraham Lincoln was actually a vampire hunter through his whole life and presidency. Weird concept, totally weird concept, and I'll give you that. But it is a phenomenal read. It is absolutely funny, hilarious. There's some horror elements in it. It really is just, it's a good book. Seth does a great job of putting in history and really researching Abraham Lincoln's life and then adding to it. Now, of course, this is not real. Abraham Lincoln, students, was not a vampire hunter. Or was he? This book gives you a good argument as to whether or not he really was or wasn't. I mean, come on, we know he wasn't. Or was he? That is Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter by Seth Grahame-Smith. Give it a check. It is an awesome read. Funny, scary, all of the above. We're going to do a little bit of a dive into some classic literature here. I mentioned in my library tours how much I love John Steinbeck. He is one of my favorite American authors. Just absolutely enjoy his work. A lot of students in 9th grade read Of Mice and Men, which is a phenomenal title. But what I have here is actually John Steinbeck's The Pearl. Now, as you can tell, this is a very thin book. It's very short. I believe it's only 90 pages. Yeah, 90 pages long. Very quick read. But it is an old Mexican folktale that he has taken and actually written down and published. Of course, this was many, many years ago that he did this. And it's about decisions that we make in life, whether certain things are worth basically whether or not certain things are worth going for, if it might have a negative consequence. It is a beautiful story, wonderful, wonderful story. Easy read, like I said, 90 pages. John Steinbeck's The Pearl, old Mexican folktale. Give it a look if it's something that might interest you. Yes, your library will have this book. Amazon also has it, eBay as well. Give it a look. John Steinbeck's The Pearl. Next is another classic, and this is a book that I gave to my son, and I gave to my son a year or two ago 15 books that I felt like he needed to read before he hit adulthood. And this was definitely on that list. It is George Orwell's Animal Farm. And my goodness, it is an absolutely amazing title. Some kids read this in middle school. Some kids read it in high school. Some people read it in college. That's how well that book translates over time and through different age gaps in people's lives. I read the book for the first time as an adult, and it gave me a completely different perspective than if I would have read it as a kid. I know that for a fact. It's kind of like J.D. Salinger's Catcher in the Rye that I talked about in the last episode. Reading that book, The Catcher in the Rye, as a teenager, then reading it as a young man, and then reading it as an older gentleman like myself now, I got 3 different feelings from it. Same would probably happen for me if I had read Animal Farm as a kid. I highly suggest you guys read it. It's basically about how animals take over their farm and how they decide to live their life, how they decide about freedom and and government and things of that nature. It's fascinating read. Not a very long book as well, extremely thin. Probably sit down and finish it in 1 or 2 sittings. Let's see, it is roughly 140 pages. Pretty decent there. So take a look at Animal Farm. Great story, great book. This one is not an American author, but this is one of my favorite pieces of literature of all time. And forgive me if I butcher the name of this guy. He's French. It is The Stranger by Albert Camus. Now, again, I don't speak French, so, I'd look at it and I go, Albert Camus, but I believe it's Albert Camus. The Stranger is an excellent story about this young gentleman and how he goes about life and how he interacts with people. And people just think he's really weird and odd, and it's his outlook on the way he sees things, and it's very different from the norm. And it's about how people judge other people who don't think like them. And it's kind of scary how it turns out. It's a good reference on the way the world views other people with different beliefs. Very good book. It's had an impact in other ways. Like if you've ever heard of the band The Cure, they actually wrote a song called "Killing an Arab" about the book, because that actually happens in the book. The main character ends up killing a man, and they recorded about it. This book has been talked about in numerous lit circles. And I believe there's been a few different kind of film adaptations of it, but not necessarily called The Stranger. They've been worked on and changed into different things, but with the same concepts and principles. So it's a story that if you read, you might have actually seen it or heard it in another media before, which is really neat. So that's Albert Camus' The Stranger. Love this book. Great book on existentialism. This is an interesting book here. So everybody knows who John Grisham is. John Grisham is a very famous legal writer. He writes a lot of books about lawyers. Even to my students out there who maybe you've read a John Grisham book. He's known for like The Firm. God, of course, now that I'm talking about him, I'm drawing a blank. The Firm was a great book. The Appeal, The Racketeer. I've read every John Grisham book there is. But I think some of his best works are actually the ones that are not legal books. This one is not one. This is a baseball book that he wrote called Calico Joe. And it is a story about redemption, forgiveness, relationship between a son and a father. It's a beautiful story and heart-wrenching at the same time. This very prominent baseball player, Calico Joe, is rising through the major leagues in his very first season. And like halfway through the season, all of a sudden, he gets beamed in the head by a baseball and his career's over. And the story focuses on how that impacts his life, how it impacts the pitcher's life, the guy that threw the baseball, and how it impacts the son's life, the son of the pitcher. It's an amazing story. John Grisham also wrote Bleachers, which is an awesome football story about players and their coaches. And then he also wrote Playing for Pizza, which is about a football player that goes and plays professional football in Italy. And if you Google it, Italy does have professional football, American football leagues out there, which is really neat. So John Grisham isn't just a legal author. He does other books, some sports books as well. And then, of course, he has a Christmas book or two out there as well. Those are all right. Not my thing, but those are all right. But in my opinion, one of the best John Grisham books ever is Calico Joe. Something you can take a look at if it interests you, if coming-of-age stories for about kids transitioning to adults and their fathers, things of that nature. If that interests you, that's definitely a good book to look into. So I in the last episode, I talked about Christopher Pike. Now, when I did my library tour, I mentioned how Christopher Pike was like my favorite teen horror author when I was growing up. It's true, he was. Yes, R.L. Stine was good, but Christopher Pike, in my opinion, was amazing. This was not a book I read as a teen. It's actually one that I read 2 or 3 years ago, and it caught me by surprise because it is not a horror book from Christopher Pike. It is a science fiction book. And why that caught me by surprise is I was expecting something scary, and I got something way different. This is called The Starlight Crystal by Christopher Pike, and it is a book about time travel and doing things and saving people that you love, and what are you willing to sacrifice to be with that one person that you love in this world. It is a fantastic read, like really beautifully written. It's a teen book, but it honestly, Christopher Pike could have made this into a more adult-centric novel, and it probably would have done extremely well. But instead, he focused on making sure to stay in the teen mind frame and the decisions that the main character has to make. It's in a beautiful read. It's not one of his scary books. It's not one of his horror books. It is science fiction. Christopher Pike's The Starlight Crystal. Give it a look if you are interested in anything that is sci-fi. It's an amazing story. You should totally check it out. Time travel and science fiction. Awesome. This next book is one that I just finished not too long ago. I picked this book up a while ago and I hadn't got around to it. And it was just a beautiful story. I love books about sports and stuff, but this one caught my attention because it's about sports, but it's way more than sports. This book is called The Art of Fielding, and it is by Chad Harbach. So here's the cover here. The Art of Fielding by Chad Harbach. Now, this is a bigger book, okay? It's a little bit longer. The story is very deep and detailed, but it covers so many amazing characters. Now, this, I gotta say, is, in my opinion, one of the best LGBTQ books I've ever read. It talks about different players on this baseball team for this college, Westish College, and the connections that they make with people, and what is love? Is love between certain people okay and acceptable? And whether you believe it is or you believe it isn't, it's a great look into what love could look like from different angles. And then also about growing up and realizing your potential and your purpose in life and what really matters to you. It's a fantastic story, one that took me by surprise. I thought it was going to be more focused on this team making a race towards the championship, and it does focus on that, and there's some great baseball elements. It is a baseball book, but it's really focused on the characters, just the characters in general and how deep they are. A wonderful read for those of you who are interested. The Art of Fielding by Chad Harbach. All right, guys, that's it for this episode. Happy reading to my students out there. Again, I love you. I miss you. Let me know if there's anything I can do to help you out. And stay tuned for more episodes. Bye.